This is your host Jane Hales and welcome to Team Talks, the podcast where we explore how to boost your business with innovative and everyday automation solutions. We make it easy for everyone to improve their processes and think creatively about their business, even those who aren't tech experts. In each episode, we share lived experiences, actionable strategies, and relatable stories about careers, growth, and the odd failure. So whether you're looking for success strategies or learning from challenges, we've got something for you. So let's dive in and start to tame your tech today. Well, thank you so much. Welcome to Team Talks. I am so pleased to have you here, Hanna. We've known each other in a number of capacities over the years, and it's great to see your career grow and where you are now. What would be really useful, I think, for the audience is a little bit of an intro. I mean, I'm currently sat in London. Whereabouts are you at the moment? Tell me more.
Thanks for inviting me, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great.
Yes, I'm based in Budapest, Hungary, so I'm not in the UK anymore. And it's not far away, actually, a couple of countries.
Are you sitting there on your own, or are you working within a team in Hungary?
No, I'm the only Hungarian in Hungary. We've got another Hungarian based in the UK, so there are 2 Hungarian snowplowers, but I'm the only one in Hungary.
Lovely. So when you say snowplow, that's nothing to do with the weather, is it? Tell me more about what you're doing at the moment.
So I work for a tech company called Snowplow, which is essentially operating in a data space. It's quite like a exciting industry. Lots of innovations happening there. I don't know how much you know of that space, but
tell me more. When you say data, I'm intrigued what you mean by that, because often in market research we say we're in the data space.
That's very interesting because it's similar to some extent, but quite different at the same time. Maybe 10 years ago we would have called it big data, and to nowadays it grew into like a quite big industry itself. So we work with behavior data collection and modeling essentially at Snowplow, and recently we are providing visualization solutions as well. So it's trying to capture the whole end-to-end process for like essentially collecting the data about website behavior, mobile behavior, modeling it, powering like machine learning models ideally. And then also the data consumers can visualize it and look at dashboards, and it's powered by large data sets, and we are enabling that. Snowplow is part of the thing that's called the modern data stack.
Okay.
So, like there are players in this field, and the idea is that they would complete each other and work well, and like people who are very like data mature, or companies who are very data mature, they can kind of like spin up their own setup, which they think would work best for them. So it's quite like a techy thing, really. But like just for comparison, like I think probably the most famous competitor of us is Google Analytics. So just to get an idea of what we are doing.
That makes sense. Super. Yeah. So it's obviously data heavy. You mentioned modern data stack. What does a researcher do? Describe research. Am I using the right term to describe your job? What is your role within Snowplow?
I'm a product researcher at Snowplow. I'm helping to build a better user experience, product experience for our customers. But I'm also here to help with business strategy and provide all sorts of support. It's a bit similar to market research, actually. Yeah.
Now, this is really quite interesting. I've been in the industry 30 years, and this whole term market research, in the recent conference, there was what words should we put into the room 101? What should we get rid of? And market research was one of those ones that they voted on.
For getting it rid of?
Yeah. So you've defined yourself as a product researcher rather than a market researcher. Would you mind explaining a little bit more? Because those that are new into the industry might not understand the subtleties of it.
Sure. So I don't think that it's very different from market research. The foundations are similar. The methodologies and approaches are quite similar, but like I think UX research, product research, like kind of diverted from market research. They, I think, became a bit more efficient, relying more on top-notch tooling. That's one thing I found. Maybe that's not like the academic difference, but that's my perception that like market research, sometimes it feels it's lagging behind with like kind of using the same like old kind of methodologies, using the same processes. I think the main difference is that like product research operates in like started to operate in tech space, and it's a very like innovative environment where everyone is kind of like always up to like trying out and doing new things. This sentiment got picked up by product researchers. I tend to say that I'm using the same skill set that I used to use as a market researcher, but in slightly different ways. The foundations are the same: finding out the business problems, coming up with the best way to tackle them, setting up a research, running a research, and then helping with like creating actionable insights. So it's quite like the foundations are the same.
I noticed you said the words top-notch tools. What do you mean by top-notch tools? And I love the fact that maybe you're a part of a group that's using something more exciting, product researchers compared to market researchers. Tell me more.
I think it's partially coming from the remote world, but also from the fact that in tech, you often want to get something very quickly, and I think spending the minimal amount of money and driving the maximum value. And I think there are like a few like tools that are supporting that. So for example, having a research repository is something that I think I've never come across research repositories before working in more traditional market researcher roles. Have you heard of Dovetail or Maze? They are the two biggest players in the field.
When you say repository, is that a bit like a database or a library? Tell me more about those products.
It's a library, essentially. It helps democratizing research, which is a controversial term, I think. Like there are lots of debates around like, shall we democratize research even more? Yeah, it's not just that. So it essentially helps you with transcribing interview records, tagging, analyzing, writing up insights. So it's essentially a central source of truth. Recently, they introduced AI summaries, and I just started to play around with that. But like, actually, it's shocking how good it is. I mean, I think there is a long way to go to tweak the algorithm to make it better. You can upload an interview, get it transcripted, and then just run the AI summary, and it will just like pull you out with the key things. It's pretty scary, actually.
Yeah, we'll come back to why you're scared in a little bit, but that's really quite, well, it sounds really powerful. You upload it, it happens, you press a button. Okay, let's stick with the scary bit, because my mind's running. Scary to whom and why? Why would that be the case?
So scary because like, I think it's not necessarily scary for us, but it's certainly going to be scary for new people who want to enter the industry. You asked me about tools, and there are a few more that I'm using. Essentially, many of them are taking over roles that could have been filled by junior researchers.
Mm-hmm.
So as a senior, like a lead researcher, you get to be more efficient and quicker, and you can focus more on the impact that you're driving rather than preparing stuff. I expect that this is going to happen even more in the future. As fresh grads or juniors or research execs, I don't really know how they could tap into this space anymore. These used to be the stuff that we all did for years, like writing up research transcripts and pulling out the different nuggets and trying to play around with the data. And if it's get like automatized, well, then like how can someone new to the industry upskill themselves? So that's the scary bit. But also there are tasks that are less favorable for researchers that now can be taken over, like managing participants. So there are a few tools that's working with helping with, they call themselves UX CRM. Have you heard of that?
UX CRM.
UX research, UXR CRM. So it's similar to CRM systems, but for managing your users. And for example, there is a provider called Raleigh that we have been using for a while, and they essentially help you build a panel, like a customer panel of your own customers. So that's one thing, and it's but you could say that this could like live in an Excel sheet. But what Raleigh does is automate the whole recruitment process with automated messages. They can create like research links, they can automatically sign up to research interviews, book into your calendar, incentive can be paid. So lots of those little things like writing, signing consent forms, all those things that Otherwise, it would take up much of your project management capacity. Now it can get speed it up a lot. So it's such a great tool, especially in my case, I'm the only researcher at Snowplow. So I've got to do like everything, and like tools like this really helps me to like, just be on top of everything.
And in terms of scale, how many projects do you get through a year as one person working in a department?
I've never really counted that. Lots of things are changing. So sometimes you like start a project, but then it got suspended, then you have to do something else. So I haven't really counted that. It's a good question. I will do that. But it's not just project work. I'm not only in charge of doing project work. I've got a few other responsibilities like championing research in the company, enabling others to do research. So the idea is that like, well, you are the only researcher right now, but actually you should like kind of multiply your impact by like training other people like designers, product managers to like be able to kind of run their own research projects. So sometimes I just like help them with like recruitment or like helping them writing the discussion guides or reviewing and like designing a research project or being there with them in the interviews and I don't know, maybe running workshops to chatting about the findings, but they are essentially the ones who are gonna run those projects. So I guess this is part of democratizing research. Part of my role is doing that. So and being on top of the whole thing which is called XR Ops, the research ops side, managing our panel, recruiting people, being on top of consent, negotiating with vendors and those kind of stuff. So kind of making sure that like a research department is, like running smoothly in the background.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of plates to juggle. So as I'm hearing, you're acting as an internal consultant, enabling the democratization of the research. You're an expert project manager, but you're using the tools in an expert way through having understanding of what a researcher does, what a product researcher does. You did mention that there is issues with democratizing research, that it's a contentious issue. If it's working so well for you and your company and you've got all of these tools that support you so you can move into this consultancy element of it, what is the contentious elements around it? If it's making...
I think it's some sort of gatekeeping attitude that you often come across in the research communities. Like, and like, I'm not saying that it's totally wrong. Actually, I haven't picked a side yet. Like, I kind of understand where they are coming from, but also understand the value of democratizing. The point is to get the right balance. So it's not that like random people in the business can make, like go out and do whatever they do and call it research without making sure that it's like valid and it's like representative or obviously nothing in terms of qual, but like, so I think that's one end, letting that happening, and the other end is just like, like closing the doors, saying only the central research team can conduct research. And everyone else should come to us first, and they shouldn't even look at a Gartner report or whatever without our approval. I've got experience with that kind of environment as well, where research should control everything. I think it's a very typical mindset. I don't know your experience, but my experience was this in the market research industry.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and that's a good observation, I think. I know when I was looking through last year in terms of the key trends in 2023, of the top 5, the trend towards democratization of research was definitely being, for an industry to have better impact, we've got to let go of some of our key skills. We've got to teach the wider audience, those product category managers, CEOs, the tools and skills to make sure they're not making the wrong decisions or understanding the buyers correctly. But you can't be there for them all the time, otherwise it's too restrictive. It becomes too purist. And as you say, academic versus the professional research is a different ball game, isn't it?
Agree. And I think research is a serious profession, but I don't look at research as rocket science or brain surgery. I think someone who is not a researcher still probably can conduct quite fairly good interviews after a bit of training. The research they do might drive only 60 or 70% of the value that could have been driven by a professional, but like sometimes it even matters. It still enables that person to kind of do their job better, right? So if, for example, a product manager goes out and do some research, which is not perfect, but maybe good enough, then they can understand better, empathize better with customers, and like eventually build better products for them. It was hard for me to accept this mentality because I was really thinking about research, but we have to be strict. You have to make sure that sample composition is right, like the whole interview structure is just perfect. I'm not saying that sample composition is not important. I think it's the number one priority in qualitative research, but come across any major failures yet when other people conducted research and concluded any super nonsense thing? Maybe other people have other experiences.
Oh, no, that's interesting. I mean, you mentioned that market research is a serious profession, and that initially you had difficulty in letting go of people doing some of your role for you and sample, etc. How did you overcome that issue you had, or how did you actually let go and see that this was the way forward?
I think changing the industry was probably the biggest impact. I did some work in tech before, but it was just as a freelancer, and it's always different. And then like starting to operating in like this environment, which was very, very different from any other place I've worked before. And being surrounded with people with this mindset. I had a manager and I learned a lot from him about like how we should like approach research, how we should like kind of enable others, and like what is your role as a researcher. It's not just that like you, I don't know, running and creating amazing projects. It's also about like making sure that every day you teach others. It's not just about research, but like about the insights, about the customers. So, like kind of look at my role as like kind of like someone who is every day trying to provide useful information for people in all different channels. Sometimes on Slack as just a snippet of an interview or something. So it doesn't have to be like a standalone project or anything, just something that, every day they get a bit like more aware of like customers and understand a bit better the market and what kind of things are shaping the market. And I think that's probably one of the biggest values that I can provide.
So you're sort of owning your success in part of the journey by just looking at the small things that you can do to help step change, help move people forward, rather than only viewing your impact when a project is completed. When you're giving those recommendations, you're looking at those little things that you do on a day-to-day basis.
I think it's a bit different than those in the old days, and probably we still sometimes do it today. Going away, working on a research project for a couple of weeks, then getting back to your stakeholders, showing a nice presentation, and then moving on. You don't quite know what happened with that. And I'm not saying like sometimes you need to do that, like doing proper research, writing it up properly, and making sure that stakeholders have them. I think it's better if you engage more with your stakeholders and like spend and in a in-house role you have the chance to do that. So it's not like when you are working in an agency where you see your clients once a month. You have more opportunities. One more thing that's quite different from everything I've done before is that in an in-house role I'm not using agencies or external support. So like an internal consultant, but also at the same time like executing the research projects end to end. So it's like being an agency but taking both sides benefits.
Interesting, because I remember we spoke before and I was trying to get my head around the role that you were doing and what it is, and the term UX research, and you mentioned that earlier today, and you kind of say it's not client side, it's not agency side, but I would view you as client side. Okay, you're not buying services from an agency, I get that, but you're sitting within your client company. So why wouldn't you consider yourself to be client side?
It's client side, but traditionally, if you sit on client side, you are in charge of getting your stakeholders' requirements and translating the business requests into research requests, writing research briefs and sending it out to agencies and look for proposals, and essentially you are supervising them, maybe helping them, but essentially they are the ones who are executing. I mean, that's been my experience. From I very rarely had a chance to run research on my own when I was sitting on client side. So I do like full operation on my own as a researcher here. So it's like I haven't. So I've been working for Snowplow almost for 2 years now, and I have never written a research proposal requesting to agencies. Once maybe I considered using freelancers, but we haven't. It's also because our industry is so it's B2B SaaS and the data space, so it's very, very complex. So it's not that you could very easily explain to someone what you need. So it's not that an agency could walk in and be in the right position after a couple of days of desk research to understand customers or prospects or their needs. It's quite specific.
Yeah. This is good, and I'm learning. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Team Talks. Wow, weren't they great? So stay tuned, and we'll be back for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into the topics we've touched upon today. Don't miss a beat, don't miss a dot. Subscribe to our podcast today.